Only in that relationship with our Heavenly Father do we find everything that satisfies us, and so He is our great priority.
Welcome to Corinth Baptist Church Sunday Worship Services with Pastor Teacher Joey Carroll.
When pastors fall into sin, they gouge out the road of the gospel. If you're born again, and yet you are unrepentant in sin and unwilling to deal with sin in your life, you're gouging out the road to the advance of the gospel.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to come back and share with you from the Word of God this evening. And we will read through all of Proverbs chapter 4 together. So if you follow along with me. Hear, O sons, the instruction of a father, and give attention, that you may gain understanding. For I give you sound teaching. Do not abandon my instruction. When I was a son to my father, tender and the only son in the sight of my mother, then he taught me, and he said to me, let your heart hold fast my ways. Keep my commandments and live. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom. And with all your acquiring, get understanding. Prize her, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a garland of grace, and she will present you with a crown of beauty. Hear, my son, and accept my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have directed you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in upright paths. When you walk, your steps will not be impeded. When you run, you will not stumble. Take hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked. Do not proceed in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Do not pass by it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they do evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. My son, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to all their body. Watch over your heart with all diligence, and from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you deceitful mouth, and put devious speech far from you. Let your eyes look directly ahead, and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right nor to the left. Turn your foot from evil. I bring you to this passage this evening. Partly is because of how I am moved by what's happening in the world today. And part of our response as the church, in light of all the things that are going on in society around us, it is necessary for us to come to this passage. But what really started me studying this particular passage out of Proverbs was there was a brother some time back, and we were sitting together over coffee. And he said, you know, Steve, I really want to leave behind a legacy. He said, you know, I wish that I was like an architect or something like that. I could build this giant bridge or maybe a big building and have my name on it. Or maybe even if I had my own property, I could build this house and I would leave behind a legacy for my family. And that is what got me started on this passage. This really is my answer to that brother that day when we had the conversation. And I would say that it is something that is necessary for all of us. You could say, well, I'm not married yet, but I'm planning on being married. Well, this is a great place to begin, because eventually you will have children and you'll need to understand what your role is. If you have kids, maybe you've started down the pathway, sort of bewildering now, what do I do with them? Well, this is a great place to go. But I bring you to this passage this evening, and I just would like to walk through it, and I'm not going to get through all the particulars of it. There are 27 verses. We don't have that much time. But I would like to highlight some key aspects of this chapter for us. But before we begin, I want to talk about family, and I want to start there. And this definition of family comes from my time of studying Proverbs and Psalms and looking at the rest of the Scripture. And I want to start with this to sort of get our minds in the right place. So if you will, I'll define family. Family is a primary structure of life. It is the divine foundation for all of society. You go back to Genesis. What was the first institution that God had established? It was marriage. Husband and wife. They were then to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Yes? That was the foundation. This is the foundation for all of society. When we look at the ills and the woes of all that is happening in this country around us and all the changes that are happening, and we can look and say, I want some things to be different. The reality of it is where it begins, it starts in our homes, with our families, with our children, and us being godly fathers and mothers and raising our children up to glorify God. Because the truth of it is, if you look at the breakdown in society, it begins with the home. It begins with the home. And if you just watch what is happening in our nation in just the last 10 years, the assault upon the household has been great. So first comes our turning our back on God, right? Then comes the assault upon the family. And from then on, everything else crumbles. And Satan knows this. He knows what God's plan is. He knows what God's intent is. He knows God's design. Therefore, he is going to attack the very thing that God has established. And according to God's design, family is crucial to all society. No matter where you go in the world, it will be the same. This is a universal. It is a universal. And if you have a breakdown in the home, you will have a breakdown in society. And so our answer to the world in relation to how to live differently begins within our context of our households. The design was not a matter, now this is important, the design was not a matter of family for family's sake, or family for the sake of success, but family for the sake of giving glory to God. And this was to be passed on from generation to generation. This is important, and part of what led to me in understanding this particular truth, that it is not family for family's sake. There are times in ministry where I've seen families where they were struggling. And I've had the father, mother, or both of them come and say to me, you know what, we're having trouble in our home. There's a lot of struggle, there's turmoil, there's strife. We need to deal with our family. So we're going to step away from church for a while. We're going to get our household in order. Then we'll come back and worship with God's people. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. Church is where you need to be when your family is struggling. You need to be in the midst of God's people. You need to be there where you can be encouraged and exhorted and strengthened and even held accountable. So it is not family for family's sake. And there are a lot of families who are like that, especially in a homeschool group of people. And homeschooling is good if you do it right. But there are a lot of people who are into homeschooling their kids, and what they're doing is they're pouring all their attention just into their family, and they're forgetting all about God's family. And they're forgetting all about God in the process. And we're warned in Psalms 127, if you build the house, right, and the Lord is not in it, it's done in vain. It's done in vain. So it's all worthless. The next thought is that when we come to the book of Proverbs, this is an amazing place to start. If you want to look at family, what is its intent? How is it to look? How is it to function? I mean, this is a place to come. This is why I always challenge parents, go to Proverbs. And when we go to the Christian bookstore, we'll buy all these kinds of books on parenting, and we'll forget to come to the one book that God gave us. This is the epitome for understanding God's design for the household. It's great for children. It's a great resource for children. I mean, I'm always challenging my kids to be in Proverbs and to grow in that. But it is for family interaction as a whole. It's funny because my kids, I'll do something will be going on in the house, and I'll say, you know what, that reminds me of a proverb. Finally, my son's like, man, you had a proverb for everything, Dad. And I said, well, that's what God gave us, right? So one dear sister in the church made T-shirts for all my kids, and on the front it says, there's a proverb for that. There's a proverb for everything in life. It's a great place to be. And it's amazing to me how few people study it, and it's for everyone. It's not just for the young people, it's for all. Notice me in chapter 1. Verse 4, it says, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge and discretion. And then this is an unfortunate translation. The Hebrew should rather be translated this way. Let a wise man hear and increase in learning, and let a man of understanding acquire wise counsel. In other words, Proverbs is for all ages, for everyone, for the naive, the young, but also for those who say, hey, look, I've been around the block a few times. I know what life's all about. I got the answers. No, you still need to come here. There's so much for us to gain from Proverbs. This book is essentially God's family counseling. But it's not for the sake of success. It is for the sake of godliness, righteousness, and bearing witness. The reality of it is that family is designed to glorify God, not for family unto itself. And there'll be a lot of us, we look at someone's household, their family, think, man, their kids are dressed nice. They're all showered up and clothed well and behave well, and their house looks immaculate and everything else looks great about them. But you look at that and you'd say, man, that's a successful family. But if they're not glorifying God, then they're failing. Then none of that stuff really matters if God is not at the center of it all. So I bring you to Proverbs chapter 4, and I title this message, Being a Living Legacy. And it is, again, my answer to that brother of saying, I want to leave behind a legacy. And the question to all of us is, what kind of legacy are we passing on? We all are doing it. Whether we intentionally do it or not, we're all passing on a legacy to those who come after us. We're leaving behind something for the generation to follow. Even those who don't have children, you can be single for all of your life. You're still leaving behind a legacy because people coming up behind you, they're looking at your life. And it's amazing that the people that will watch your life, and you don't even know they're watching it. I realized this one time, my young cousins and I used to work out with them, both played football in high school, and we'd work out together. And all of a sudden I noticed they were using the same phrases I would use. They started sort of having the same mannerisms and physical movements and stuff that I had. And I realized these guys are watching everything I do and listening to everything I say. They are mimicking me. And then I stopped and asked, well, what am I teaching them? We're leaving behind a legacy. The question is, what kind? If I could define for you tradition, it means this: a handing down of beliefs and behavior by word of mouth and by example. And two of my favorite Proverbs are this, and this is one that just is a joy to my heart. Proverbs 23:15 through 16, and I'll put it in its exact order, although it's in English for you, but here's the order. It's in a chiastic structure, and it begins like this: My son, if your heart is wise, when your lips speak what is right. Now notice the progression. It starts with the heart, inside, moves outward, right? So wise heart, then wise words. Yes? Great progression. This is where it starts with the heart. Now in the middle of this is this: my own heart will also be glad, and literal translation, my kidneys will rejoice. In other words, this is a father's response to a child who has a wise heart and manifests that wise heart in words, in action, as they live in life. They're passing on this wisdom. And as a father sees this is what brings him that deep down emotional joy. This is what I want to see from my kids. I want to see them have a wise heart, and then I want to see that wisdom manifest in their life, and I want to see them passing it on to other people. And that's why the focus on the lips that speak what's right. But how do they get there? It starts with us. It starts with us. Another one of my favorite Proverbs is Proverbs 27. A righteous man who walks in his integrity, how blessed are his sons after him. The verse begins with the man who walks. It ends with the sons after him. And you can see this progression, right? The leader, the followers. But notice the characterization of his walk. It is integrity. And as a result of that, those who follow behind him are blessed because of that inheritance or that legacy that's been passed on. And that is what my challenge is tonight for all of us, especially for the men, is that we need to be leaving behind a legacy for those who come behind us, and especially for our children. And our impact is deep. John Piper said this in regards to his own father. He said, now more than ever, there is a sweet indebtedness I feel to him, and the happy holiness he has lived for the glory of God, and notice, for my sake, all these 55 years of my life. See, this is what we want to leave behind. We want our children to be able to say this about us, that when I looked at my parents, and especially at my father, I saw him live for the glory of God and for my sake. He left something behind for me. So let me take you to chapter 4, and let's look at the structure. And if this is all you remember, awesome. So you can just turn the lights out after you get through this section right here. So this is all of chapter 4. There's 3 parental entreaties that come. And they all begin with the similar wording, hear, hear, and then make your ear attentive in the last exhortation. And I've broken up these three parental entreaties by three words, and we'll look at them in a second. But notice how he begins. First instruction, or the first entreaty or appeal comes in 4:1. Hear, O sons, the instruction of Father, give attention that you may gain understanding. The next one, verse 10, hear, my son, and accept my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. And then the last one is in verse 20, my son, give attention to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. You have this repetition of hear, hear, pay attention, or listen to. And the Father is not concerned with just acoustic perception. He wants the Son to hear and obey. It's about perceiving with the intellect. It's about obedience. It's listening with the intent on doing something in response to what they hear. Right? How many times we talk to our kids and it's like in one ear, out the other, right? What the Father's trying to do is to keep the words from having to do that. He wants them to stop right here, so eventually they'll come down to here. So he says, I want you to hear what I'm saying because I want you to be obedient to it. I want you to walk in that. Three words, though, I'd sum up this chapter. The first one is seek. That's the first entreaty, verses 1 through 9. Seek. And you can read back through these verses and see why I've established it this way. And they're all calls to action. The next entreaty, I can sum it up with this. Choose. Choose. As fathers, we need to teach our children how to make choices. See, as parents, we want to protect our kids. We want to make all the choices for our children because we want them to make the right ones. And so we go around and we start making all the choices for them. We choose the things that they wear. We start early on, the stuff that they eat. All of this stuff, we start making choices after choices after choices after choices. But if we do that all of their life, and then finally we get to where the point we're going to send them off to college, we say, okay, now go make choices for yourself. They're not going to know how. They're not going to know how. I started with my kids early on. And Proverbs instilled this in me. So I started with them and I said, okay, look, this is what Dad wants you to do, okay? Now you have a choice. You can do what I ask you to do and obey, but here's the consequences if you do that, right? You can choose to disobey, and now here's the consequence if you choose to disobey. Now you need to make a choice and live with the consequences. We have to teach our children how to make choices. They need to know how to do this in life. And the last one is concentrate. Concentrate. And it's clear from the first few words of verse 20. Give attention to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. So that is the chapter. The three parental appeals or entreaties to the Son: seek, choose, and concentrate. And from here on out, the rest is just fill. So just listen and let it fall where it falls. But you can go back and read the chapter in light of these three words. So let's talk about the Father, and that's primarily where the focus is. But starting in chapter 4, verses 1 through 9, the first thing we find is that the home is the primary place for moral instruction. This is important, and this is found in the terms that we see in verse 3. When I was a son to my father, now if it just stopped there might be question, but with the added words, tender and the only son on the side of my mother, we understand that this is a household context. Now some have suggested that what is being dealt with here is that this is the reference to father is a technical term of a sage, someone who is teaching another person. And oftentimes in Jewish tradition, if you had an older man that taught young men, he would be considered the father, called father by those sons, and then they would be called sons, and they would have that teacher-pupil relationship. But when we look at the context and the wording is here, it is clear that this is a household. And this is Solomon reflecting back on his life with David and his mother. But primarily the relationship between Solomon and David. So this is to be taken literal, not metaphorical. And so therefore we see that the household is the primary place of instruction. We see this in chapter 1, verse 8. The first exhortation that comes in Proverbs, it is the father exhorting the child to listen to his instruction and not to deviate from the mother's teaching. We see this throughout Proverbs, but the interesting thing is that the focus we're going to find on the father aspect. But this is key for us. This is so important, especially in this day and age. Mom and dad are to be the ones who give instruction to the children. Now, I'll just tell you, the home is a place of education. That does not mean that all Christian parents should homeschool their kids. I think it's good. There are a lot of reasons why I think it's good. But if a Christian parent decides to send their kids off to public school, does not mean that they're sinning and not fulfilling God's mandate. John MacArthur used to say one time, he said, I heard him in a message, and he said, I will not allow school to get in the way of my children's education. In other words, I will send them off to school. When they come home, I will make sure that they are trained up in the things of the Lord. And that is the primary instruction that we are to give our children. It is the moral, the spiritual instruction. Now, if you want to teach them math and all that, fine. But it is the morality, it is the spirituality, and it's our responsibility. It's not the responsibility of government. It's not the responsibility of pastors or youth pastors. It's mom and dad's responsibility. I was doing youth ministry years ago, my wife and I. We first got married, and there was a couple that came to me and they said, would you talk to my son? He's having these struggles, and they were explaining the things he was dealing with. And they said, would you go please talk with him? And I said, well, my task is to come alongside and support you and to back you and to encourage you, and I want to come alongside and help you in any way I can. So I said, when you talked to him about these issues, what did you say and how did he respond? And they said, well, we haven't talked to him. I said, well, I can't talk to him then. It's not my job to be his parent. That's your job. I'll support you any way I can, but you have to parent him. We have to remember that because we have a government that's telling us, no. You don't know how to take care of your kids. You need us to teach your kids. I mean, you get Hillary Clinton out there saying it takes a village. It doesn't take a village. It takes me and my wife, and that's it. And I don't need government telling me what's best for my children, because the reality is they don't know what's best for my children. When my son was going to school, he was enrolled in public school. He's doing band, and then he's enrolled in another school where he's taking classes in that. And there was some conflict with scheduling of classes. And so they're arguing, and then the school contacts us, and they say, well, he has to drop out of these classes. And it all boiled down to money. Money. Everyone wanted to make sure they got their money, and that's what it's about. And I'm sitting there saying, you're not even concerned about his best interests and way he is going to be fruitful and grow and to mature in these areas. You're concerned about money. So the best one to raise our kids is the parents. And we find this depth of love and concern for them. And this is probably one of the most intense and endearing sections in all of Proverbs that we find throughout here in these parental appeals that come through the first 9 chapters. So the reality of it is, as we look at chapter 4 and we see the appeals that come, the love that is manifested here, we see that the best teachers for the children are parents. Parents. The other thing that we notice about this is that we realize that wisdom is an inheritance that is to be passed on. It's something that takes place in the household, but I'll say to you that the father is to be the primary instructor. It's the way God designed it to be. Just stop and dwell on that for a while, because it's so easy for us to just leave it to mom. I mean, they have a tendency to spend more time with the kids than the dad does. And that's a part of God's design too. But there's a tendency, especially with homeschool families, to say, well, all right, mom's homeschooling the kids and I have my job to go do. And so she's going to so that's her thing. My job is to go and earn a paycheck. Her job is to raise and teach the kids. No, fathers are to set the tone of the household. They are the spiritual guides. They are the moral guides. They set the tone for the household. The mothers, yes, they have a part of instruction, and there's a lot of teaching time that my wife has with the kids, but it is the father who needs to take a role in this. And we find that throughout this particular appeal. And notice in the first 9 chapters, look at all the different parental appeals that come in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. It's the father who's reaching out to the children and challenging them to listen. So the father has to take this active role, and basically he's going to teach and communicate to the child the value what he values and to maintain the character he maintains. And we'll see here that the father's responsibility is to teach them to crave the things that are good and delightful and the things that are pleasing to the Lord. But these are affectionate appeals. And notice the intensification that comes. We'll start with the first one, 4:1. He says, "Hear, O sons mine, the instruction of Father. Give attention that you may gain understanding." There is this repetition of phrases in which the father is making this passionate appeal to the child to listen. There is love involved here. There is a desire for the father to have this imparted to the child. Then they want the child to understand what it really means to live. Notice verse 4. "Then he taught and he said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live." I want you to understand what really living looks like. I want you to understand what a life in the wisdom of the Lord is going to look like. I want you to embrace this. And so over and over you have these passionate appeals by the Father in chapter 4. That's interesting because this same father who said to me, I want to leave behind a legacy, we were sitting one day in the driveway in his car, we were talking, and his son was coming over to the car. And he looks at his son and he says, you see him? I said, yeah. And I thought he was going to point out some amazing thing that he noticed about his son. And he says, man, he really just drives me nuts. And then he says to me, he says, you know what? I just can't even stand him. And I said, you got to be kidding me. This is your own son. This is your flesh and blood. How can you say that about your child? And I realized after that moment, I watched his life and how he interacted with his other children. I realized the ones that he really cared for, the ones who were like him. And the ones that were more like his wife, he didn't care for them. But I'm thinking, these are your kids. These are ones that God has entrusted to you to care for them, right? They are gifts from him. You are to care for them. You are to raise them up. You are to educate them in the things of the Lord. And he's telling me he can't stand his son. It's interesting because I was looking back thinking, Luke, the first couple chapters. What's amazing about that section is here is the dawning of the Messianic age, all right? The last prophecy given in the Old Testament was Malachi. There was what we call the 400 silent years when no prophecy came. Now, God was active, but there was no prophecy that came. All of a sudden, after 400 silent years, God's going to now speak again. And he sends his angel Gabriel into the temple where Zacharias is doing ministry. And he says to him, you're going to have a son. Now, this is what's awesome about that encounter. He says to him, he is going to turn the hearts of the fathers back to their children. I'll just tell you this, if there's ever going to be true reformation, the family has to be involved, and it has to start with the father and relationship to his family. Martin Luther understood this. We all know the Reformation for sola fide and all of that went on, but do you realize that Martin Luther also brought about reformation in regards to the family based on Psalm 127 and 128? He brought about a transformation that hit Europe, and they'd never experienced that before. And it was all about the family. So the challenge here is that the father is to be an instructor, but he is to do so out of a loving care and compassion for his children, that they might understand what living a life of wisdom in the Lord would look like. The father is to appeal, identifies the son. This is a shared experience. And I love this because in verses 3 and 4, notice what he says. He says, when I was a son to my father, tender and the only son in the sight of my mother, then he taught me and he said to me. I love this. He's putting himself in the position of the son. Sometimes I forget this as a dad. I forget what it's like to be a kid. I forget the struggles that I had when I was a kid. And I forget that because then all of a sudden my kids come to me and they're wrestling with something and I don't stop to reflect back what it was like. Notice the first exhortation that comes in chapter 1. Notice with me. He says this, verse 10, he says, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol. Verse 13, we will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one purse. Notice, let us, we. What is that? That's peer pressure. That's peer pressure. The father knows what that's like. He knew what that's like when he was a kid. He is prepping his son beforehand what he is going to face when he gets older. You're going to face peer pressure. Just remember, as you progress on in life, the older you get, don't forget what it was like to be a kid. And try at times to put yourself in your kids' shoes and understand what they are facing, because the passing on of this inheritance will be a lot more effective if we can do that. Notice with me, the father's affectionate appeal upholds parental dignity. And it's done by showing the chain reaction in verses 3 and 4 of this passing on of this tradition. This is something that has been passed on from parent to child, parent to child, parent to child. This upholds the dignity of parental teaching, and it shows the fact that these teachings have stood the test of time. This is awesome because I can, in my ancestry, I can trace all the way back and have all the way back to Edinburgh, Scotland, pastors in a long line from my dad's side of the family, all the way back to Edinburgh. You know what's amazing about that is that all those generations from then until now, Those who were believers lived by the same book and the same truths, and they were valid for them just as they are valid for me now. It's the great thing about the Word of God and the teachings that come from it. When we pass these things on, they're eternal. They're never out of style. They're never irrelevant. They're always relevant because they're eternal. And the great thing is that if we're going to leave something to our kids, forget all the material stuff. I mean, we have these antiques and all of these heirlooms and stuff we want to pass on to our children. Forget all of that stuff. Just pass this on. And if you pass this on, you give them something that will last them a lifetime, and it will go on for generations to generations into eternity, yes? So the Father is challenging him. I want you to embrace the things that I've received from my parents. But he does this in a one-on-one way. He does this by how he reflects on the teaching that he received from his father, sitting on his knee, and the instruction that he received. But you also see this in chapter 7. And I would just exhort you as fathers to look for those teachable moments. Turn with me to chapter 7 of Proverbs. So the first exhortation, there's two exhortations that come in Proverbs 7. And the first 5 verses is the first one. Then starting in verse 24 through 27 is the second one. In the middle is this life episode, okay? So in the middle of these two exhortations comes this incident that happens. Notice verse 6. For at the window of my house I looked out through my lattice, and I saw among the naive, and I discerned among the youths a young man lacking sense. The father is going to go on to describe the scenario that he saw, this life event, and he's going to give the son's instruction in light of it. What's important about this? This struck me as so amazing early on when I first came across it. I realized I need as a father to be looking for those teachable moments. It's not just about sitting in an enclosed room at a table, a desk, what have you, and teaching your children like this. It's about being out there in life. It's about encountering things in life and stopping with your children and say, you see that? Now let me teach you something about what God says about that. You see, they need to be able to take the Word of God and apply it to situations in life. And how we do this is by going through life with them and taking those moments. This can't happen if we're constantly busy and worrying about our schedule all the time. And I'm just going to tell you, if you're going to parent well, you got to learn how to just, everything stops on a dime and you're going to park it if you have to. I remember my 4 boys one day got into an incident. It took well over a half an hour just to sit down and to highlight each and every one of their actions, who did what was wrong about it, to break it down, show them the right way from the Word of God. Good half an hour or so, killed, but not killed. It was worth it. But the problem is we're so busy, go, 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 and we're rushing through life. And even when we do family things, we're in a hurry to get through that family thing that we can miss those teachable moments where we can teach them a life lesson that will be implanted in them and never depart from them. But if we're too much of a hurry to get through life and the experience of it, we can miss those moments. Look for those one-on-ones. I have to do that, 6 kids. I got to find a lot of one-on-ones. I usually do it too where I sit, and I've set Friday nights aside for movies, and we'll sit and do that together. And I'll spend time with them, and we'll talk, and they can open up and share. But find those moments with the kids. Next, notice with me, the Father teaches a love for that which counts. We'll walk through this. Chapter 3, how blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding. For her profit is better than the profit of silver, her gain better than fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. What the Father is going to do is He is going to cultivate a love for wisdom. Notice with me, turning back to chapter 4. We'll start in verse 5. Acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will guard you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is acquire wisdom. With all your acquiring, get understanding. I mean, over and over and over, the Father is going to challenge him to love her, to prize her, to embrace her, to go after her. And he is going to show that this love for wisdom, it is going to require enthusiasm. Notice how many times the word acquire happens in verses 5 and 7. And in verse 7, he violates deliberate grammatical rules to make a point. And the point is simply this. The first step in the pursuit of wisdom is to determine to obtain it. Man, go after it. Listen to me. If you want it, go get it. And this is something that's important for us as parents and fathers to understand, is we can't make our kids do it. In the end, we can't make them do that. We can lay it out there. We can provide it for them. We can model it for them. We can exhort it to them. But if they really want it, they got to go get it. Not only this, but we see from chapter 4, the second exhortation from verses 10 to 19 is the fact that the Father teaches the way of wisdom and He warns the way of wickedness. This is important because the Father teaches that life is a journey. And the doctrine of the two ways run through these verses. And we see it in the terms like way, path, step, stumble, pathway. And here is this second exhortation from verses 10 through 19. It is this. We have the way of wisdom, verses 10 through 13. The way of the wicked, verses 14 through 17. And then the two ways that are compared in verses 18 and 19, and very graphically so. But here's what I want to hang on in verse 11, because this is important. The Father teaches there are two ways in life, right? Life is a journey and you can only pick one way, choose it. But here is an important part in this, and it is verse 11. And it is simply this. The Father teaches and leads in that journey. Here's the verse in its structure. It starts off in the way of wisdom. Then it ends with in upright paths. And in the middle, he says this, I have directed, I have led. There's a difference between the two sides. He is basically saying this to the Son. Both in word and in walk, I have led you in the way of wisdom. It's just not enough for me as a father to just say it with my mouth. I need to live it with my life. Far too often with parenting is do as I say, but not as I do. When Proverbs says you need to say do as I say and do as I do, or teach them and say this is what it looks like. You need an example? Here I am. Here I am. I mean, essentially we are looking at discipleship here, right? It's not just merely making disciples of those in the world, it's making disciples of our own children. It's teaching them and then walking in the way. The Father teaches, choices have to be made. In a sense, this is an inheritance that each generation must receive. In other words, it's about decision. It's not about brains. It's not even merely about opportunity. It's about making a choice. It's about making a choice. Notice the context. Verses 10 through 13, we see it in the appeal that comes. Hear, my son, accept my sayings. Take hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. It's seen in the exhortation in verses 14 and 15. Do not enter the path of the wicked. Avoid it. Do not pass by it. Turn away from it. Pass on. Over and over, we see this aspect of the fact that the child has to make the choice, make a decision. But it's not about one-time decision. Even when we talk about our salvation, it's not just about that one-time moment. Notice verse 20 or verse 21. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart. It's about a life of decision. It's about a life of choice. You are constantly choosing that path. Every decision you come to in life, you're making a choice. Every conversation you have between saying the right thing and the wrong thing, you're making a choice. Right way, wrong way. God's way, the world's way. And this is tough as a parent. This is tough as a parent because this is what I want to do. And I just said this to two of my boys this afternoon. I wish that I could just crawl into your heart and transform your heart for you. But I can't. I can't. I can shepherd it. I can teach it. I can exhort it. I can encourage it. I can rebuke it. But I can't transform it. And I can have them by rules set up in my household, make them walk the walk with me, but there's going to have to come a time where they decide that this is the path I'm walking on myself. It has to become their own. This is why we have all of these books on parenting and stuff, some system to try and make my kids do it. You can't make them do it in the end. This is where, I'll just tell you, the most important tool a parent has in life, and it is simply this. When you get to this point right here, you get down on your knees, and you stay there until they're married and raising kids of their own. Then you start praying for your grandkids. You do all you can do, but you know you can't do everything. You can't do everything. The Father teaches vividly the depravity of man. Notice with me verses 16 and following. For they cannot sleep unless they do evil. They are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble. Verse 17, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. This is the one thing it's so fascinating to me of Proverbs, is the fact that the father does not hide the world from the kids. Just doesn't. You look at the early chapters when he describes the immoral woman and all that, he paints a pretty clear picture of what the enticement is going to look like. There are so many parents, especially homeschool parents, and I'm not trying to belittle homeschool parents, but we homeschool our kids. But it's the wrong understanding most oftentimes that they have. It's like they're going to put their kids in this bubble the whole entire life, and they never have to deal with the world, and they never face the world, and they never have conflict with the world. And they put them in this nice bubble, and then they take them on, and they finally get to college, they send them off to Bible school, and they think, okay, finally then I'm going to let them out of their bubble, and they're going to move into another bubble, and they're going to be fine and make all the right choices. No. I went to Bible college, man, and I can tell you so many kids, their parents kept in a bubble all their life, made all the decisions for them. Finally, they got to Christian school, and their parents weren't there. They were in another state, and they now had to make choices. They had freedom, and all of a sudden, boom, life hits them upside the head, and they have no idea what's going on. None. So I say, my wife's job is to protect our kids. My job is to prepare them. And my kids have not lived a sanitized life. They have lived an antiseptic life. We have had homeless people living in our home. We've had those who have lived a life of sin and are now turning their way back towards the Lord and dealing with the consequences of that life of sin in the midst of our household. My kids have seen that. They experienced that. They're seeing the consequences of years and years of living in a sin, and now then dealing with the consequences of those actions. They will have a good taste of what the world is going to offer them when they get out there. And what better place for them to encounter the world? Send them out there into the world while they're at home and have them wrestle with it. Have them go to conflict with it. Then you can bring them back in and then you can straighten them out, right? But if they're gone and out of the home, it's too late. It's too late. Look at Jesus and the disciples. He sends them off, right, ahead of them. They come back, He corrects them. He sends them off, they come back, He changes their perspective and shows them where their vision is off. I'm not saying that you need to sit there and have the world be there enticing for them and all of that, but they need to learn how to face it. They need to learn how to deal with it. And we cannot hide it from them, and the Father does not. He shows them that they live for crime. It is their food, it is their drink. They cannot rest unless they do that. Listen to me, there are people out there who are just as zealous to do wickedness as we are for godliness. And our kids are going to face that. He reveals to them the recompense that is going to come, verses 16 and 19. It's interesting because verse 16 says, they are greatly satisfied if they see others fall, but in verse 19, they're going to fall and they're not even knowing how or why, because they're walking in the darkness. Finally, the father challenges the child to stay to the way of wisdom and carry on the heritage. And this is the last exhortation in verses 20 through 27. Notice with me. My son, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to all their body. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. That is the key. Put away from you a deceitful mouth and put devious speech far from you. Let your eyes look directly ahead and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right or left. Turn your foot from evil. Essentially, we have anatomy class in these verses. Notice with me. The eyes are to stay fixed on the right teaching. The feet are to stay in the right path. The mouth and the lips are to avoid being used for twisted words. The heart must be guarded by sound doctrine because it is the wellspring of life. I'm just going to tell you, I tell my kids this all the time. It's not the circumstances, it's your heart. It's your heart. From that flows the issues of life. Circumstances don't control us. The heart should. It's not the circumstance, but it's how you respond to it that matters. And in the end, if the child heeds the father's instruction of walking in the wisdom of God, if the child does this, his whole body will be healthy. Verse 22. The exhortation to us from this entire chapter is simply this: as fathers, is we need to leave behind a legacy. We do this. people watch us, we're leaving something behind for those who follow us. The question is, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind? Are we leaving behind one that is in wisdom and godliness and in the way of the Lord? Or is it in the way of the world? And we realize that we are discipling our kids and teaching our kids. Some of us are doing it haphazardly. Some of us are doing it unintentionally. But the challenge for us from this passage, for you men, is we need to start doing it intentionally. Because the answer to the decay of our society is God at the center of godly households. And that is how our society will change. It will not be with our president. It will not be with rules and regulations. It begins with us. And that's how God designed it to be. Let's pray.